When the father entered the room again, the child who was once crying was now a resolute, if sniffling, little soldier. He stood behind his father, back straight, face beet red. The mother and the sleepover guest, left alone to watch the movie while the punishment went on, sat together on a couch cushion on the floor.
Mickey has decided to play the piano for everyone,
Mr. Crispo announced.
Isn't that right?
The boy looked at Mickey as he nodded his head, snot running down his left nostril. Though they were not friends entirely, he felt a strange pity for the red-faced boy.
Yes,
Mickey sniffled.
I would like to play the piano.
The boy did not know Mickey could play the piano. He never mentioned it, never played it in music class, didn't listen to songs like some of the other kids did during recess. Yet he could play, and play well. The family took what appeared to be regular spots in a room downstairs that held a grand piano and antique furniture. The father sat in a carved mahogany chair, the mother beside him on a jade fainting couch, and the boy, nowhere to sit, sat on the floor. The father nodded to the music with studious glee. The whole while, the boy watched Mickey's face. His lip trembled, his face red and wet. He could move his head this way or that, seemingly fade out of focus, all without missing a note. Then the father began to sing.
Story, find me in the dark. Story, guide me through the night. Story, brand me with
The need to pee that had flashed earlier returned to the boy now, and he jumped to his feet as the piano continued its funeral march rhythm.
What is it?
Mrs. Crispo whispered. The boy pinched the tip of his penis through his corduroy pants.
You should have told me. It will take a few minutes. Come on.
She sat up from her couch and softly led the way in her padded socks. Before they even reached the door, Mrs. Crispo made the boy stop and went ahead, locking the door behind her. The boy waited outside the bathroom in agony as Mickey continued playing the song in the other room, Mr. Crispo singing along. Inside the bathroom, Mrs. Crispo was making a lot of noise, scrapes against a wall, the unmistakable rip of duct tape.
Come in now.
Mrs. Crispo called. The boy opened the door and gagged at the odor. He had only ever smelled bathrooms this bad when he went to Cub Scout camp, where the bathroom was tin troughs over a big hole in the ground.
Your jug has your name on it, see?
Mrs. Crispo took the boy by the shoulder and pointed at the wall.
No one can get it then,
She explained.
It'll be safe with us.
In a line, each family member had a plastic jug attached to the wall, their names spelled above in a hand-carved wooden placard. Brenda, Gary, Mickey, and Jesse. Old tubes of ribbed yellow plastic dangled out of each jug for easy access, tubes alone for the boys, an attachment like an oxygen mask for the mother. Next to Jesse, whose jug was a quarter full, a new jug was taped to the wall and written in Sharpie, Guest. In the corner, a wooden barrel with a toilet seat stood humid like pavement in summer. There was no sink.
I'll let you get to it.
Mrs. Crispo whispered and turned her back. She did not leave the room.
Well then, do you boys need another story?
Mr. Crispo asked. He sat rigidly in a special chair the mother brought into Mickey's room, a massive gilded book open in his lap. He had read them 2 stories already, and the boy didn't like any of them. In one, a baby was stolen by a family of rats, hollowed out, then lived inside. In another, a plane dropped minivans of screaming families onto houses and public libraries, while the people on the plane cheered. The boy felt sick. He missed home so much his head hurt.
No, I'm tired, Daddy.
Mickey Crispo said, smacking his lips, and then he yawned.
May the story watch you, my son,
the father said, and drew the leather straps across his son's body. Mrs. Crispo sat on the floor next to the boy's sleeping bag. She tried to ease the guest's horror.
He gets night terrors. It's for his own safety.
She smiled.
And yours.
Then she leaned over and said the same words as the father.
May the story watch you, my son.
And she kissed the boy long and hard on his forehead. He could smell her saliva. It was like sour milk. Both parents stood and walked out. Mrs. Crispo, the last to leave, turned off the light. In the dark, Mickey was silent. The boy hoped his host was already asleep. His bladder was hurting now, though it had become easier to hold after a certain threshold. He couldn't pee in front of the mother, so he had just stood there, pants zipped up, for minutes. Now he wished he had just done it. If he peed his sleeping bag, he couldn't imagine what Mr. Crispo would do to him. Would he take him to the garage? Hurt him? Now every lie about the father felt real. The robber killing, the gun making, anything scary about this man had to be true. His bladder pulsed again.
Ugh.
The boy ached as silently as he could.
Hey, are you awake?
He heard Mickey whisper. He didn't say a word.
Hey, are you awake?
Still, the boy said nothing.
I'm sorry.
Mickey sighed. That was it for a long time. The boy waited in agony, certain he would burst any second. But he forced himself to hold it until it felt like a half hour, maybe 2 hours even, had gone by. He listened for the parents, but they made no sound. He listened to Mickey, and his breaths seemed to slow, turn rhythmic. The boy sat up with a slight crinkle in his sleeping bag and shimmied out. He went for the door and turned the knob. It was locked.
Hey, I thought you were asleep.
Mickey said in sudden alarm.
I have to use the bathroom.
The boy said.
But you went.
Now that their eyes had adjusted, Mickey could dimly see the boy shaking his head, dancing a little.
I couldn't. You know,
Mickey said, choosing his words wisely.
I could take you to the bathroom if you want.
The boy thought on this.
I really have to go,
He said.
Unstrap me. You just gotta click the little metal things.
The boy refused, but the bladder was persuasive. It compelled his body to the bedside, convinced his hands to loosen the straps. As the straps came loose, Mickey slipped from his bed, ran to his dresser, and pulled out the top drawer. He found a long, skinny, flathead screwdriver.
Come on.
He grinned. Mickey forced the screwdriver into the small hole in the middle of the knob and turned the internal mechanism to open the lock. The parents must have been in bed for a while. The house felt like no one had ever lived there. Buried into a hill, it was as black and silent, as cold and inhospitable as space. The hardwood floors were ice on the boy's bare feet. Every corner they turned, the boy waited for a cigarette rasp, a stomp, and a garage of tortures. Mickey led the boy down one set of stairs, then another, then through a long hallway. They were not going to the bathroom he had failed to use before. Finally, they stopped before a closed door.
Are we close?
The boy asked.
Shh.
Mickey spat against his index finger.
I have to go. After this.
Mickey said.
What? We have to see my secret.
He grinned. The boy wanted to cry, but instead he pinched the tip of his penis and danced uncomfortably in his spot. This was a dirty trick.
No.
The boy finally spoke up.
Take me to the bathroom. Sure. Of course.
Mickey said. He opened the door and led the boy inside. The moment he heard the breathing, the boy wanted to flee. Mr. and Mrs. Crispo were asleep in separate twin beds, a nightstand as mediator between them. Mrs. Crispo breathed like a clogged teapot, and Mr. Crispo breathed like a clogged toilet. Mickey didn't stop by their beds, but crawled quickly by, finger kept to his lips in warning. He rounded the end of his father's bed frame and turned a corner in the L-shaped room. The boy kept on Mickey's heel, and when he came to an abrupt stop, they collided.
Here it is.
Mickey had brought them to the parent Crispo's double closet.
Okay.
The boy whined.
Can I go to the bathroom now?
No.
Mickey said a little too loud. He caught himself.
Don't you want to see my secret? Aren't you curious? We came all this way.
The boy could not bring himself to object. It was true. He was a little curious. So when Mickey pulled the door open, the boy stayed and witnessed. The closet was largely normal. Suit coats pushed to the right side on Dad's part, long dresses filling up the mother's side, a big Tootsie Roll can full of loose change, wrapping paper, old shoes, a baseball mitt, and a sewing kit. Where the closet was not normal was inside the glass jar, sitting on the floor. It appeared to glow and smelled like sardines. The boy had seen jars like these in pet stores, a cardboard display sitting inside a small school of printed fish, 6 gallons, filter included, and inside this jar was a child.
Meet Jessie.
Mickey introduced the boy.
He's my secret brother.
He smiled. The boy could not tell if Jesse was alive. He floated in the jar, not belly up at the top or sunk down in the bottom, but like he was perched on the tips of his toes in the water. He was nude and small, smaller than a baby even. But the hair was so long, frizzy and floating wild, but waving in the water like algae. Jesse's nails were long. The eyes were closed, the face a small, rotting apple of flesh.
It's Mom's fault, Dad says. He says the story denied her. Let me pick him up.
Mickey bent over the jar, reaching his hands into the open top. The boy could not stop himself.
No!
He shouted. Around the corner in the room, both boys heard the father's clogged toilet snores snort to a stop. They froze, as though the man could hear their elbows creak and hearts beat.
Mickey?
He called in a strange haze. Then the anger arrived.
Michael!
They heard sheets rustle and the mattress groan. Mickey connected eyes with the boy in pure terror, his face colorless and eyes all white sclera and pinpricks of pupils. The dilemma was clear. Which crime did they want to be caught for? Breaking out of bed, sneaking into the man's room? They knew immediately they did not want to be caught looking at Jesse. But Mickey was debating a whole other dilemma in his head beyond all of this. Was it better to be caught as a duo or alone?
Shh!
He hissed again with a kiss of his pointer finger and shoved the boy inside the closet. He shut the door and ran for it, screaming incoherently. The boy waited for the closet door to rip open, the man's cigarette voice to scream and his hands to grab. Instead, he heard the man thunder out of his bed and chase his disobedient son out of the room. The mother, staying behind, cried in her bed.
That boy of mine!
She sobbed.
That boy of mine!
And the boy could imagine her rattling the bars of her imaginary cage. All the while, the jar glowed. The fear of imprisonment quickly replaced the fear of being discovered. There was no room to move inside the closet, and the boy now realized he felt the cold of the jar pressed up against his folded legs. He tried not to look at the child inside, but he could not avert his gaze. Jesse's eyes were now open. Then came Mickey's screams. The father shouted,
Where is your guest? Where did he go?
and all the while Jesse stared, the inky black marbles of its empty eyes flickering as the waving inches of hair passed in front. The boy could swear Jesse moved, quaked, turned to watch his new guest, and then suddenly the boy felt warm all over his pants, and he didn't have to pee anymore. When the boy awoke, the piss soaking his pajamas had turned cold, and Jesse and his jar was now turned to face the boy, his hands and forehead smushed up to the glass. The boy could not believe he fell asleep. Then came the shouting.
Boy!
Screamed the father from the other room.
Boy, where are you?
Mickey, the boy thought astounded, had not fessed up. If the boy went quiet, he thought he could hear Mickey sobbing somewhere distant.
Show yourself, boy!
The boy listened then for the mother in the room. He did not hear her. Quietly he stood, ashamed to feel the urine under his foot, and pushed the closet door open. The bedroom was empty. The boy thwapped his sockless feet down the hall, leaving the bedroom door wide open. It was brighter now, the sun rising and filling the above-ground windows with deep yellow. He made for the stairs when he heard Mr. Crispo pound down the top of the same set of stairs.
You didn't check the bedroom, mother!
He called.
If he is inside, it is both of your hides!
The boy ran back down the hall, and hearing the father approach, made a hasty choice. He hid behind the open door of the bedroom. The father saw the open door at once as he came down the hall and began running.
He was in the bedroom!
The father roared. The boy felt the man's feet pound by him inside the room, and though he knew he had to run, he couldn't. Inside the room, the father pulled back sheets, shouted and kicked. Then he saw the closet door.
Brenda! He was in the closet!
The boy heard sniffing, then a groan.
He pissed! He pissed on our Jesse!
And then the boy couldn't keep still. He had no other choice. He had to run for it. From behind the door, the boy raced for the stairs, no longer caring if he was quiet or not. He waited for the father to thunder after him, but he did not leave the closet. Instead, he screamed,
He's out! Get him, Mother! Now!
The boy ran up the stairs with heavy slaps of foot sole and heard another door open on the second floor. As he rounded the corner and made for the next set of stairs, the woman was in view.
Pisser! Unholy pisser!
She shouted and took chase. The boy was grateful he had forgotten socks, as his bare feet were able to catch the wood and keep him stable. A slip anywhere, and he'd be dead, he was certain. At the top of the second stairs, the woman was only steps behind him, so he bolted down the hall for the final stairs to the mudroom.
Boy!
The mother called. None of them had learned his name.
You stop right now, boy!
He was midway up the stairs when her hand caught his pajama bottoms, but she did not hold long.
Piss!
She cried as though it burned her hand.
Boy, piss!
And then the boy was in the mudroom, toying against the deadbolt, and she was at the top of the stairs. The bolt slid clear, he grabbed his shoes and ran out into the dawn. He made it only 4 feet before he fell, skinning his knee through the pajamas. He waited for hands to fall upon him, to drag him back inside. He looked back. Mrs. Crispo stood on the threshold of the door. Though he had fallen only 2 steps outside the door, she would not leave the entrance to grab him. He saw again the potted plants closer to the door with bright green leaves, the pots just a step away, withered to black and brown.
Come back in.
She said. The boy shook his head.
We can eat breakfast.
She smiled this time.
Aren't you hungry?
I'm not fucking hungry!
The boy shouted, emphasizing the daddy word with all his might. The special word did its trick. Mrs. Crispo made a nauseous face and shut the door. The boy stayed where he was, too afraid to move, until he heard the garage door open on the other side of the hill. He thought of Mr. Crispo at once. Muffled by grass and dirt, he still heard feet thunder, a cigarette voice grunting under strain. He hid behind the decaying potted plants and counted to 100. He then took a peek and saw Mr. Crispo walking through the woods, an impossibly large matte black gun in his hands. It was all true. The boy did not wait to be discovered. He ran up the driveway as fast as he could, and peering over his shoulder, almost didn't see when his father's truck pulled over the hill. The man honked, slowed, and the boy jumped in before the father could come to a stop.
Just please go.
The boy pleaded. "Where's your bag?"
Please go.
was all he said. The father shrugged and pressed on the gas. As the house faded behind the trees of forest, the boy, at only 8 years old, felt survivor's guilt. He had gone away, yes, but Mickey was still inside, and he always would be.
The story must be told.